Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another episode of the Chelsea Fan TV podcast. First things first, guys, make sure you smash the likes, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and as always, make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below. And finally, Chelsea are back in action this week. The last international break until March is finally done and dusted. Touch wood, no fresh injuries for the Blues, but yeah, it's been pretty boring. I think this has probably been the most boring of the three we've had. We've obviously had three back-to-back, September, October, November. This one's felt like it's dragged a little bit. But yeah, there's loads to get into. As always, the Newcastle game and Nkunku and Lavia stepping up their fitness levels, kind of where Chelsea are at in general. I mean, some January transfer news is kind of gathering a little bit of steam as well. And I'd like to be joined again by Alex, mate. Second time on the pod. Good to have you back. Could you say that perhaps, given we were building up some momentum with the Spurs win and the Man City game, that maybe this international break sort of come at a kind of a bad time for us? I suppose the last couple, haven't they? We sort of built up. We got the Fulham and Burnley games, and then we had an international break. And then we've kind of had two good results and another break. You almost want to keep playing. Would you say that potentially this one's come at not the best time for us?
Well, if you look at the way we're playing, then yeah, you could say that. But also, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the players that aren't playing. You're in Kunkus, your Chukwuemeka's, so hopefully this period gives them a little bit more time to recover. And, maybe before the end of the year, we'll actually get to see them getting some minutes. I know last year when we had the World Cup coming up, we were desperate for it. Me and you were at the Newcastle game when we got battered there. And I've never seen a more toxic Chelsea fan base. So, look, I mean, sometimes you need a break, sometimes you don't. I wouldn't say we were in the best form, but I would say things were definitely getting better. And, from the get-go, I've been relatively positive. I think I've been the most positive. Even if we were still playing rubbish football and struggling to get the results, I would be standing behind Pochettino on the basis that, the guy needs time. And he's actually doing me more proud than I presume, because I still thought he struggled just as we did at the beginning of the season, because we've got so many new players. And, when you have such a big squad, you got to gel all these players together. And then you say, okay, who can play where, who can do what, and who's actually going to start for me. And I still think to this day that we're still trying to figure out our best 11. We started off preparing for pre-season in a certain way. And Nkunku, Chukwuemeka, Jackson, Sterling, that was usually what we started up top. Now Cole Palmer's in the squad. He's a guaranteed starter. So when everyone's fit, where does Palmer fit in? Then you've got your Mudryk and other players who, Madueke definitely going to go on loan, if you ask me. So, I mean, I actually think that we're so blessed with the amount of players we have, but it's a double-edged sword. The problem is that you can play when players are injured, but then when everyone's fit, you're going to have great players that aren't getting the game time they deserve. So I think December's actually come at a great time for us. We spoke about this, the other day, Charlie. You were saying you only made one video in about a week or so, which is obviously quite unusual. Usually we're here every other day making something. But there isn't much to talk about. So it's just going to be game after game after game. And, this is something that the players need to get used to anyway, because fingers crossed we'll be in Europe next season. So this will be a normality. So I think that this is a really important stage. And the fact that we've cleaned up, what we had under the Roman regime means that hopefully that December rut as well is no longer a thing. So, December can start being a good month for us instead of a difficult month. So I don't know, mate, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling optimistic. What about you?
Yeah, no, mate, I'm always a glass half full type of guy. Like you have to be like this constant being such a waste of energy, just non-stop negativity. But look, I think you make a couple of good points. That obviously with the games coming up thick and fast now into December, we're going to be playing sort of every 3 days. It's pretty full on now up until Christmas, the New Year sort of time, and you make a good point that with these players coming back from injury and getting our full squad available again, that's going to be a welcome headache to have. I think, coming up to the end of November, start of December, what everyone thought would be Chelsea's best team, we haven't actually played our best team in theory once this whole season yet. So that's got to be a positive to look forward to. And again, there's going to be selection headaches when everyone becomes fit again. But actually, it's almost come at sort of the right time, because we suddenly now got a load of extra games, and there's going to be a lot more rotation within the side. You're not going to be playing the same 11 every 3 days across the whole of December. So suddenly you're getting all these players back, which is a hard juggling act, but a good problem to have. It's a problem you want to have. There's going to be better options on the bench. I think at times this season we've been at games, mate, and you've looked at the bench and you've thought, fuck, there's, due to the injuries, there weren't an awful lot on there. You had maybe like one attacking option on the bench, and the rest of it were kind of a few utility players, some youngsters and defenders and whatnot. So that's going to be a good thing to have, is that we can be able to strengthen our starting 11, and then we're also going to be able to have a better options on the bench, and we're going to have the games that all these players need. But on the flip side as well, I guess one sort of downside and one kind of reservation I always had about this recruitment route that we've gone down is that all these young players all need minutes to develop. But when young players are taking minutes off other young players, some are going to develop at a faster rate than others, and others aren't going to get the minutes that they need. And that's a problem that we've got to deal with. It's a difficult balancing act to have. But actually, when you talk about the Chelsea squad, I don't know what you think, mate, but it's a lot better than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for, just because we've not had a full squad to pick from at all this season. When you start looking at the players that are going to come back, obviously Reece James is now back in the fold. We've got Chukwuemeka to come back, who had a good pre-season and started the season really strongly before getting injured at West Ham. You've still got Ben Chilwell to come back in. You've got Nkunku to come in. You've got Lavia to come in. The squad suddenly is looking decent, and there's going to be good options. So I actually think the squad is a lot better than people give it credit for. Broja's still building himself up to full fitness. We've got Jackson, who's now 4 goals in his last 2 games. I'm not saying that like everything's amazing, but there are signs of positivity and things are starting to come together. And I do feel the squad is actually a lot better than people give it credit for. I mean, do you feel the same way, or do you think actually, do you know what, that these guys still need to prove a lot? But I guess they do. But what I mean is, in terms of options and quality of player that we're going to have at our disposal over the rest of this year, hopefully, and beyond, I think we've got some good options. And even if we rotate the side, it's not like there's going to be a significant drop off in key areas.
Yeah, man, we've got a great squad, but they definitely need to prove themselves. I mean, like Jackson's only had a year of experience or 2 years of experience in the top flight before he joined Chelsea, and Mudryk, played in the Ukrainian league, which you wouldn't really say is one of the better leagues in world football. So, I mean, the list goes on, right? But the potential was there, and that's why we signed them. And if a player has potential, he's got a great manager, he's got great facilities around him, and you're playing with better players, all you need is the mentality, and your potential will shine through. I think we're seeing that with most players. And, the nice thing about the past few games, especially the Tottenham game, I think actually that's a very different game to see, which we can, get into as well. We played rubbish, mate, at Tottenham. And I went out of that game almost disappointed with a 4-1 win, which is should
have been 8 or 9.
Oh, my God, mate. We were so bad. I don't understand how you can't break down a team with 9 players who were playing a high press when that's literally the only system we can play against.
Yeah, I mean, it took us 20 minutes to work out how to break down that high line, but then once we'd done that, it was all right. I guess, like, again, like we look at games like that, you look at maybe the Man City game as well, maybe not to such an extent, but I guess that's where a lack of experienced heads comes into play, because particularly against Tottenham, like a lot of the youngsters on the pitch, like people were rushing things, like trying too hard to make things happen. You need a cool head. When you've only got Sterling and Thiago Silva that are senior players and above the age of 26 in the squad, then you can understand why we potentially come into those situations. But I think if we had that situation again, we'd be calmer heads, and we'd understand like the task at hand. Just focus. You're in the stands there, and you're thinking, why are we rushing it? People are trying to play stupid balls. Everything's going out of play. Like, we're rushing it. You just need to relax, step back. It's 11 versus 9. You're going to break them down. It's almost impossible not to. You're going to have 2-man overload every time. You're going to have 2 men spare. So you are eventually going to break them down. So I think that was a good learning curve for us. I think, again, going to the Seat game, a completely different game, but another really important learning curve for this squad. And do you know what pleased me the most is that we finally seem to have got some mentality back within the side. Guys that are hungry, want to play for the team, heads aren't dropping. Even going back to last season and seasons before, you knew that if we'd gone like for example, if we gone like we go a goal down, we go 4-3 down with 5 minutes to go. You knew last season or in previous seasons, we weren't getting that back. But actually, I had a belief this time round that, do you know what? Yeah, there will be a chance. This team can get back into it. And I think, we're slowly starting to see that this group is giving us something to believe in. The mentality's there. They all want to play for the club. They're all pulling in the right direction. They're buying into what the gaffer's asking from them. And it just feels like the first time in ages you've got something that you can be proud of, which has not been the case at Chelsea for a long time. So I think, the players, the manager and whatnot deserve credit for that. But at the same time, I also have to caveat that with saying, look, we are doing well. We're doing better. You can see signs of improvement. The attacker scoring goals. It's 8 goals in our last 2 games, which is almost unheard of for us. But at the same time, whilst there's a lot of positivity, style of play is being implemented, tactical ID and identity and whatnot, you can see that. The reality is we are still 10th in the table. And I think the one thing that's missing now, we've got a statement win. We've shown we can go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the league, unbeaten against Arsenal, Liverpool, City and Spurs this season. Arguably should have won all 4 of those games. We were better side in all those matches, in my opinion. And we now just need to find a way of beating the lesser sides. But the big thing for me is we now need to go on a run of wins. We need to string 3 or 4 wins together. And like this December period coming up would be no better time to do that. I think that's the one thing that's missing is stringing a run of wins together.
100%. Let me ask you this then. So me and you have been very much Poch in. But if we had a fully fit squad, if all the players in Kunku, Chukwuemeka, didn't get injured, all these players, and we still managed to get the same results we'd had now, would your opinion change on Poch?
It's a good question. I think no, because we have to move away from this kind of hiring and firing mentality. I think like a lot of people struggle to differentiate the fact that football's changed since then. That hiring and firing, it simply doesn't work anymore. The Premier League, the landscape of the Premier League is totally different. It's a lot more competitive now. The financial landscape is totally different as well. And ultimately, I know people hate buzzwords like project and process and all this sort of thing.
You have to use those words. What else are you going to use?
Yeah. I know people don't like hearing those words, but ultimately, if you want to be successful, if you look at the sides that have been successful, they have built stuff for a number of years. There's a reason why your Cities, your Liverpools, etc., have done so well. Is because yes, they spend money. Everyone spends money, but they spent money well, and they've trusted their manager, and they've allowed them to be there for a long period of time. And I think that ultimately, I'm not saying that Poch should just be given a pass for whatever he does and he should stay here for 5 years. Obviously, you have to earn the right to stay on and show that you're improving, show that you're winning and whatnot. But ultimately, changing the manager, we've already had to start this process against once because in hindsight, the Potter appointment was totally wrong. There's no point trying to change things again because you just start every single time. You're just starting again. And you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to give managers time. I know Chelsea's not been synonymous with doing that, but the landscape's totally changed. And I just think a lot of people don't realise the direction that modern day football is going in and just think that, just sack the manager and that changes everything. The manager is only a small part of what's going on. When you actually look about it on a bigger scale, you get rid of a manager, you're still left with the same players, you're still left with the same ownership, you're still left with virtually all the same things. So, look, for me, I would be judging it exactly the same. It takes time. It's new players, it's new leagues, it's everything. So, look, for me, I know I'm probably more positive than some, and people obviously are entitled to have different opinions. It's football, and you respect everyone's opinion, no matter how ridiculous some of them are. We just have to be patient and realise that football's changed. It's not what it used to be like, where we had a winning squad and you could just drop any competent manager in and we'd win. It doesn't work like that anymore. Football's changed, and not enough people realise that.
This is why Newcastle will not be winning the league anytime soon, in my opinion, because money is not enough anymore. You literally cannot come into a league and spend your, well, let me rephrase. You can go into leagues and spend your way out of trouble, but not the Premier League. I mean, it just doesn't work anymore. You now look at the table, which I was looking at before we started, and to be honest with you, every team that's in front of Chelsea from the top 10, obviously we're sitting 10th. I'm looking at them and I'm seeing a team that's relatively stable financially, except for Brighton. I'd say every other team out there is willing to spend money. Even if it's not money they're putting in, they're generating that money and they're spending that money. So, you look at the money we spend now, it's still not enough to compete. But in the long term, the way we're looking to build things with the long term, that's why I kind of understand why, we were joking about this on the Blue Balls podcast the other day. We're looking at buying another young Brazilian midfielder, just like Andre Santos. And, I was talking about it with Father and Lewis was like, well, I'll take him. Like, I don't care. We'll have as many of them as we can. And Father was going, well, why would we do that? We've already got Andre Santos and we've got Ogochukwu and Lavia and all these. Mate, there's so many players. But the reality is what we're doing is very similar to what Abramovich did in the sense of buying players and then loaning them out. But we're just very specific with what we're looking for. We're not looking for any old players to then loan out, build them up. We're buying the best talent in world football, and we're beating some of the best clubs in world football because these players, they can see that there is genuinely a future, a long-term future, especially if you look at those contracts at a club like Chelsea, which maybe you wouldn't get, if you signed for a team like City or United.
If I was playing devil's advocate on that, mate, just for a different point of view, do you think that a lot of these youngsters are potentially joining us because of the security they're getting from the long-term contracts rather than actually the prospects of playing for the first team? Because, for example, if we sign this Gabriel Moscado, the guy from Brazil, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, right, we've got Enzo Fernandez, we've got Moises Caicedo, we've got Ogochukwu, we've got Lavia, we've got Andre Santos, we've got Cesare Castellet. That's 6 midfield players, right? Maybe you could put Conor Gallagher in midfield as well. That's 7, right?
There's so
many. You bring in, you say you bring in this Moscado guy. That's an 8th player in midfield, right? They're all young. He's not gonna be getting minutes ahead of arguably any of those guys. Well, maybe you'd be on a par with the likes of your Castellets and your Santoses or whatever. But in terms of getting first team minutes, like that's going to be limited and it's going to be difficult. And you're thinking suddenly the whole point of us trimming the squad down was to not have this issue where we've got so many players. But then you're suddenly looking at it, and if this guy comes in, we've got 7 midfielders on the books already. Like other than purely buying him for to sell for a profit. Why would we be needing to do that? This is where the balance needs to come right between getting the best talent and then just purely stockpiling.
Well, I don't mind it as well, because what it does is it gives the manager power. Because if a manager's not happy with a player, well, I've got 3 or 4 other players who can do exactly what you do. So you better up your game, otherwise someone else is going to come in. So yeah, you could say from a standpoint, obviously they're looking at the finances. So you're not going to accept a contract without being happy with the money and how, especially with the long-term 7-8 year deals like Badiashile and Fernandez, all these players. But Ferguson used to say at Man United and Emma Hayes at Chelsea, if you're not good enough, you fuck off. I'll get someone else in that can do the job. Well, we'll spend another 20 million on another player. And some clubs can do that. Most clubs obviously can't. And in the modern day, you're not able to do that with ready-made players because inflation is just ridiculous, right? Let's say we sign Osimhen for 150 million. You're not then going to say to him, better perform, otherwise we're going to get someone else in. You just spent 150 million quid on that guy. So actually, when you look at it with the younger players, you're stockpiling, but you're getting much cheaper. And the potential then, it's either going to click or it's not. You've got your Havertz's, players like that. It just doesn't click. And then you've got other players who come in, and I think Caicedo's been brilliant from the get-go. I think Gallagher's been superb these seasons. So sometimes you've got it. And, they still need to develop, of course, like anything. And we could say the same for Pochettino with some of his tactics and substitutions. But it's moving in the right direction, and you can trust that. But there are other players out there, and Chilwell could be one of those players, or Maatsen. and they're just not clicking as much, since we've seen them under Pochettino. And bear in mind the lack of minutes, that's understandable. But again, we've got so many options. It doesn't really matter if players have a lack of minutes, because if they do come on and don't perform, we'll just get someone else who can perform when they get those limited minutes. So it's a weird one, isn't it, mate? But I think it's really clever. And this is where the manager's important, because the owners are putting so much pressure on Poch to make the right decisions. But I think in terms of developing young players, bringing young players through and actually getting the best out of them, we've got the best manager that I can think of. Guardiola did a good job with Cole Palmer, but again, you've got so many ready-made superstars, you could never guarantee him the minutes. And generally that's going to affect your development. So Palmer's come in, he's now a leader, one of the youngest players in the squad. He's captain material. So I have no issue with it. I just think that it's silly if all of those players are in the squad at the same time. So, this is where Strasbourg comes in, and, we'll hopefully get another club as well. You loan some of those decent players out. I'm sure Casado will probably get a Premier League loan after Leicester. I'm sure. And was his name Angelique?
Angelo.
Angelo.
Yeah.
Angelo. I think. I think he'll get another loan out as well. There's no problem with that, because out of all of our young players, those are the most promising ones. And then the ones that aren't as promising, we sold Ampadu, all these other players. I think Maatsen will go as well. They can be sold. And if you can make a profit on them, I've got no issues with that.
I think for it to work though, we are gonna, because obviously you get 7 international loan slots, and obviously domestic ones are whatever you want. We are going to have to acquire more clubs in the multi-club model. We obviously are going to do that. You're not just going to have one. You will look to expand, maybe in Portugal, maybe in Germany, or wherever it is, so that we've got more places to send these players, and we can be more in control of their development, the minutes that they may and may not get. That's why the multi-club model kind of works so well, in terms of we can be in control of their development, because we obviously we own the club, so you can be a bit more pushy with the minutes. Obviously, we're seeing right now with Andre Santos at Nottingham Forest that loan's an absolute disaster. He's played once in the league where he came on as a sub against Liverpool. He played once in the Carabao Cup second round where they got knocked out by Burnley, and he just doesn't make the matchday squad at all. So, you're in a situation where some loans work out, others don't. And it's bad. I don't want to say Santos has kind of wasted 6 months of development time, but you almost feel that way because he's not playing any football. He's just purely gone to Nottingham Forest to train. And if we'd known that at the start, you might as well have just stayed with Chelsea. I know
that was always an interesting decision anyway, though, Charlie, because let's be honest, Forest is stacked with players. So,
well, at the time they weren't. This is the weird thing. At the time they weren't, and so you look at the Santos loan deal to Forest, you think, yeah, that's decent. He's going to play, and then suddenly deadline day, Forest is signing every fucking midfielder under the sun. Sangare comes in from PSV. They get a Dominguez, I think from Serie A, the Argentinian midfielder, and suddenly Andre Santos goes from thinking he's going to play, and then suddenly they spent big money on a couple of midfielders, and you're down the pecking order and not getting much of a look in. So that's one that needs to be looked at. But yeah, look, I don't hate the signing of young players per se, but for it to work, we're going to need to have more places to send them. And I fully get, not all of them are going to make it. That's just basic maths. But some will be sold on for a profit, and if that's the route we want to go down, then fine. But I just feel sometimes it might just be going a little bit over the top with it, because how many do we actually need? Because do you know what I mean?
Let's say we sign a player on a 7-year deal, which is the case with a lot of these young players, and they're not going to get the game time, but we loan them out for, I don't know, a couple of years. So you paid, let's say 30 million. Let's just say we paid 30 million, and then over 3 years we accumulate, I don't know, 10 million in loan fees or something along those lines. Then if the player comes back and doesn't perform, you've got X amount of loan fees. And if you are going to sell the player for a profit, you can sell him for the same price. You make a little bit of money. So I don't really see us losing in that situation, because even if you are loaning players out and they don't come and perform, obviously it's not ideal. But you've got the backup plan of being able to sell them and still make your money back or make profit. So there's no risk involved in that.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It almost is win-win. They either turn out to be really good for you, or they're not quite good enough, but they're good enough to go and have a very good career in general. And you're gonna make some profit on the fee that you paid for them. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of how this all works out. I mean, we're not really going to find out probably for 2 or 3 years down the line to sort of really see how this has panned out. But look, it certainly, in theory, doesn't seem like the worst idea in the world. But then at the same time, you're thinking, well, why has no one else done it? So you know what I mean? It'll be
Because we're
interesting.
revolutionaries, Charlie.
We are. We could be
We're
trailblazers, mate.
industry leaders. And do you know what though? It's interesting though, because Bowley's done it with baseball, right?
Yeah.
He was a pioneer in terms of owning a baseball team and the way that they ran that club. And you can even see it in Stamford Bridge now, instant replays, things like that. That was non-existent. That never happened, mate. Never happened under Roman. That's a pretty new thing. And Bowley's the pioneer behind all of this stuff. So
the fan experience, I mean, it's a slight tangent, but the fan experience, this is not like shitting on Roman or anything like that. I know things advance, but the fan experience since Bowley's come in has been a lot better in terms of, like you say, the replays, the social media content has gone up a level again. The access seems to be a lot better. All those sort of things that perhaps people don't really think about or don't really take much notice of. That like connection between sort of player and fan in terms of the access you get has got so much better. And you know what? That is something they're very good at.
Yeah, but guess what? They're very good at pushing up prices as well, mate. Don't you worry. Our season ticket prices are going up next season. Mate, we were the only, Matthew Harding, I swear, was the only place in the Bridge that didn't get their ticket prices.
I think it was just West. Wasn't it only Westview that went up?
No, East went up. My dad's seats went up. So, yeah, no, they're pushing the prices up. And to be honest, they would have already done it. But we had such a bad season that I think they didn't want to start off, their first couple of years by pissing off the fans straight away. I mean, look, if we've made Champions League, I think you could probably justify it, right? We have a smaller stadium than a lot of big teams. You've got to make up for it somehow. But no, I mean, the fan experience has been very good. But I'm not just talking about that side of things. The way that he is involved with everything is just different. Every aspect of owning a club has been covered by the media because it's so unique. The long contracts, the type of players we're trying to sign, the multi-club model. He hasn't just done one thing. He's dipping his toes in 3 or 4 areas and saying, right, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, we can do this. So we're actually giving ourselves a lot of options as well. Because even if these young players don't work, fucking hell, Strasbourg can take them and then they can do better because I'm sure in the French league, players perform differently than they do in the Premier League. So, you own multiple clubs anyway. If one club isn't going to succeed with certain players, just pass them on to the next. I mean, I'm on the City Group website right now. I mean, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 clubs, mate. 13 clubs, and we've got 2. So we've got a long way to go. I was thinking to myself, what's the point of owning a club that isn't in Europe? But, if you look at their model, they've got Melbourne, they've got Chinese teams, they've got
MLS,
Japanese teams, MLS. They've got a club in Bolivia. I mean, mate, there's ridiculous amount.
The one thing that I'm skeptical about on the City Group is that realistically, none of these players actually go on and play for City that have ever been part of the City Group model. I'm not saying it doesn't mean it doesn't work, but if you're looking at multi-club model, the best one is Red Bull, and it is only Salzburg and Leipzig. But you get players that will go from from Salzburg to Leipzig and do very well. It's almost like, they all produce good players in that. Whereas the City Group is like, they move players around between their teams, and some teams will get players that perhaps they wouldn't ordinarily get because of being part of the City Group. They'll get players that are better than what they normally would. But in terms of, like, you always look at the multi-club model, I almost feel like it's to obviously develop your own players, and then obviously help develop those other teams and make them better in a way that they perhaps naturally wouldn't be able to do so. But you also want to make sure that some of those players potentially play for your first team, and that would be my only downside on the City Group, is that how many of those people have actually gone on and played for the first team? They sign for Man City, they get loaned around the City Group, and they never play a minute for the first team. How worthwhile really is that? I mean,
I think if you're an owner, you own the City Group. It's all one big commodity. So even if Man City don't get the players, if you loan a player out to Melbourne or whatever, and Melbourne win the league, that's still good for you. So I think there's a bigger picture to it as well from an ownership standpoint. Obviously financially, you want your clubs to do well because then they're worth more. But yeah, I mean that's why there's two sides to it. So obviously you can bring players through the smaller clubs into the main feeder club, or you could regress the other way, and it still benefits your group. So either way, I don't really have a big issue with it. Let's just say Angelo comes back to Chelsea, flops. I hope he doesn't. But if he went back to Strasbourg and played really well, I'd be happy for him. And I'm a fan of Strasbourg now that's a part of the Chelsea group. What's it called? Blueco.
Yeah.
It's a weird one. It's a double-edged sword. There's good things and bad things about it, and people will say, don't spend the money on a football club. Like, just worry about your own for starters. We've got so many issues to sort out. I think we've done a lot. I think we've made an awful lot of progress. We've bought the Stoll site now outside the bridge. I think there's going to be expansions there. Me and you had debates about whether we'd relocate the stadium to Earls Court or whether we could stay at the bridge. It doesn't seem like we're going anywhere else, which looking at it is a great thing for a lot of fans. But maybe we are capped in terms of what we can do with the stadium. I hope not, but I think that could be the case. But I think maybe this is a conversation if we do end up redeveloping Stamford Bridge. This is a conversation for 30 years' time, when maybe we have different owners who want to increase the stadium even more than we already have. So, we're moving in the right direction. The youth setup is good. Obviously, the women's side of our club is fantastic. We've got our first, partner club with Strasbourg. And, I'm happy with the management. So, some people are saying you can't be proud of this team. We're sitting in 10th. This is not Chelsea. No, it's not Chelsea like we know it, but it is the new Chelsea. And, we're going to look at it at the end of the season, not now. So maybe I won't be smiling at the end of the season like I am now. But what I can see, and I think it's the same for a lot of people, is a process that is working slowly. But actually quicker than I even expected it to work in the first place. So, for me, that's a positive in itself.
No, 100%. Do you know what it is, mate? I mean, maybe it's just me, but I don't understand how people can, sit there, watch the games or go to the games and think that we're not making any progress. That simply doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it's quite clear that we are making progress. Yes, it's probably not as fast as a lot of people want it to be. But that's just the way this is right now. It's going to take a little bit of time. They're going to have to be patient. There's going to be some good moments. There's going to be some more bad moments this season. But I think ultimately we're heading in the right direction. And what gives me a lot of hope and faith is the fact that, the teams we're going to be competing with for those Champions League spots and whatnot, we've got so much more room for improvement as a team to get better. Whereas I think the teams above us, they're not really going to get much better. What you're seeing from them now is pretty much where they're at, what you're going to get from them. Whereas with us, our room for improvement and how much better we can get is the ceiling's high on how much we can improve. This is a team that is nowhere near the finished article. So that's positive in terms of the fact that we are going to get a lot better than the teams above us in terms of progression. And I don't think those teams above us are going to improve as much as we will over the course of the season. But I mean, if we throw it ahead to the sort of the run of games coming up now, we talk about closing the gap to the top 4, top 5 places. I think we're 10 points behind Tottenham in 4th right now. We have got in our next 4 games, all against teams that are above us. We go to Newcastle this weekend. We then got Brighton, and then we've got Man United as well. So the next 3 games are all against teams above us. So there's a chance to take points off teams that we're chasing down. And you almost feel like we really can't afford to be dropping too many points. I mean, look, ideally we want to win all 3, but I think it's important. You think we'll win all 3?
Mate, I don't think this is really even a difficult debate because of where Newcastle are in terms of their injuries, where we are. Let's talk about momentum. And, I predicted at the beginning of the season, and maybe I got a little bit wrong in terms of Arsenal. I thought Arsenal would be worse off than they are. But Newcastle was the other team. I said they're going to fall off. They're not going to finish in the top 4 because you've got European football, man. It makes a big difference. And, you've got great players with a great energy, but They don't have experience playing the congestion of games. We don't have the congestion, man. We talk about December, and even your Evertons and your Burnleys are going to be complaining about the amount of games you've got because they don't have the squad depth. We have the squad depth and the quality. There's no reason we can't win pretty much every other game in December. Everton is probably the hardest run of games that we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks, just because of the situation they're in. I think when your back's against the wall, sometimes you just come out fiery, and we don't even have a great record at Goodison Park.
We're not the best there.
Yeah, I mean, you could say the same for
Old Trafford as well. Old Trafford, we're dreadful there as well. We haven't won at Old Trafford since. I don't think we haven't beaten Man United in the league since 2017. I don't know when the last time we won at Old Trafford was, but again, you're looking at these fixtures, right? Newcastle with their injury problems. Yeah, you'd fancy us. If you're good, look, Newcastle's a tough place to go. St James's Park is a really difficult place to go. Newcastle very good at home. The fans are bang up for it. The atmosphere is intense. It's like a cauldron there. But I would say if you're going to right now, this is probably one of the best times possible for us to go to Newcastle, given the fact that they've gone into the international break having lost back-to-back games to Dortmund and Bournemouth. They've got a lot of injuries. Yes, a few players are going to be recovered over the break and will be back, but it's nowhere near going to be a full-strength Newcastle. So that doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy run for us. But what it does mean is that it's going to give us a better chance of getting a positive result. And you have to say this is probably the best time for us to go to Newcastle in terms of those injuries and the form that they've had prior to the break. You look at Brighton, I think they're going to have played in Europe on the Thursday night before we play them on the Sunday, which is why that game's on a Sunday. So they're going to be playing Thursday. They're letting in a lot of goals. Their form after playing in Europe has been dreadful so far. I'm not saying it's an easy game, but again, you'd have to. Our home form is dog shit. We've won one game in the league at home this season against Luton, but you'd have to fancy our chances of getting a positive result there. And then you go to the tricky ones: United away and Everton away, where, as you touched on, Everton are going to be bang up for it, backs against the wall. Sort of feel like the world's against them with a 10-point deduction. That game suddenly becomes a little bit harder. And United, despite how shit they are, as I was touching on, our record's so poor there. You never feel confident going into a game against United. So I'm not saying that we can't get positive results. I fully believe that we can, but these are still 3 very difficult games. It's one of them where you're not sure what you're going to get from Chelsea. It could be 3 wins, but then it could also be 3 defeats.
The key is how we start, mate. How we start, because I mean, I can't speak for Brighton. I actually don't really know too much about the Brighton fan base, but I mean, Newcastle and United are on their players back this season. You saw the Kieran Trippier clip on Match of the Day away at Bournemouth. I'm shocked that Newcastle fans actually have the audacity to call it their team. Mate, they are punching well above their weight in terms of what they've done over the past 20 years. And they expect the players to be able to do that week in, week out. Now, that's a great standard to have, but we also know the Geordies to be one of the most supportive fan bases in the world. So if that's changed, what that does, that puts a lot more pressure on the team. So if we start off well away, that home crowd's going to be on the team's back from the get-go, and we just need to show our support. So I think that Newcastle is going to be a good one. Brighton, I mean, that's a home game anyway. So, I mean, we beat them in the cup. I think it will be very, very similar. We've got Caicedo, a lot of their better players. I just don't think of what they once were. I like Ferguson, but for me, what they had last season was just better. They had more variety. They're a little bit more one-dimensional this year. And then United as well. Just a poor team that take chances. And we're a good team now that have been taking chances. So it really depends on us. If we perform, then we'll kill them. I don't see why we can't destroy Man United away. I think that could be an absolute thrashing, a 3-1. Because Man United, for me, they just lack something. Ten Hag's a great manager. For me, Ten Hag is in the same bracket as Pochettino in terms of quality of managers. I think they're just below the elite of the elite. You've got your Guardiolas and your Klopps and your Tuchels, and I think they are as good as you will get. And I think that Ten Hag and Pochettino are just below that. But, that's not to say they can't compete with them. It's just a case of proving it with, trophies at big clubs. And that's the real thing that separates the two. Yeah, mate, they've got a great manager, but the team's just not good enough. So I think we'll destroy Man United. Maybe not from a tactical point of view, but I just think we'll have too much quality. People think that's weird, but it's just so disjointed whenever I watch United. It never looks fluid. And now we have fluidity. All we need to do is finish the chances. We'll destroy them. You know, I think
we are starting to finish chances now, which is a good thing. Like the attack is looking a lot better than it's looked in a long time. Like we're creating a lot of chances, and we are now starting to score a few. You know, 4 goals in back-to-back games, which is we've scored 4 goals 3 times this season. Burnley, City, and Spurs. So we are starting to get amongst the goals a bit more now, which is a positive side. We're creating a lot of chances. One concern for me, and I don't know if it's a major concern, but I still think we're good defensively. We're starting to let a fair few goals in. I'm not saying obviously the City game, you can say, look, one was a penalty that should never have been given. The Rodri one was a massive deflection. And then obviously the Akanji one was just poor marking from us. We just let him have a free header in the box. So 3 of the 4 goals there, you could say, were almost out of our control to a degree. Obviously the Akanji one was error because no one picked him up. But I still trust us defensively, but I would maybe be a little bit concerned that the number of goals we're letting in is going up a little bit. But I don't think that's anything that can't be sorted out. I still trust us defensively. I still think we look solid defensively. We've got good options. Reece James beginning to get back to his best now is a massive, massive plus. As good as Gusto's been and will be for us this season, it's nothing quite like having Reece James back in the side. So that's a big plus. But I mean, are you concerned that we shipped a few more goals recently? I mean, look, I don't think it's a complete disaster because I've just explained that most of the 3 of the goals in the City game were avoidable. But yeah, do you have any defensive worries about us?
No, not really. I think the defense, if you actually look at our squad, is probably the best part of it.
Yeah.
On paper, our midfield is great, but I think we still need a little bit of work there, especially creatively. But no, our defense is good, man. Like I was, if we just go through it, I think Cucurella for me is a guaranteed start, even when Chilwell.
He is right now, yeah.
Cucurella starts ahead of Ben Chilwell, and that is just massive, massive credit to him for having the mentality to push through and just keep trying to play for Chelsea. And a big criticism to the previous managers who didn't know how to play him, because it's not hard to actually get Cucurella to play well if you play him as a normal left back. But we always played him in every other position than a normal left back. Wing back, back 3, right back. Was the first game we saw him under Pochettino. And he was great as a right back. And then you put him on the left side. To me, he was the man of the match against City. Even on a yellow, he was just fantastic. And then you go to the other side, Gusto and Reece James. I don't really need to comment on that. Silva's obviously getting to the end of his career. We've got great backup options with Colwell, Badiashile, Fofana, and Disasi. Like we don't need to sign any more defenders, and that's probably why Ian Maatsen can't get any minutes as a left back, because we're just so stacked. I've heard that they might be trying to sign a centre back potentially. But I think it's more like preemptive rather than it's more opportunistic in terms of it's probably going to be like we know Chalobah's going to go, and it's more than likely going to be probably Thiago Silva's last season. So we'll probably look to bring one in. I don't think it will look. It won't be. I'd be shocked if it was to bring in a starting quality centre back because of the names you've reeled off and the quality we have there. I just think maybe with 2 centre backs going out, you'd probably be looking to bring in one more sort of squad option at centre back. But it's not like a pressing priority. But I can imagine that's probably the way they're looking at it in terms of, well, we're probably going to have 2 going out at the end of the season. We probably need to bring one more in. So that's kind of how I look at it. But yeah, no, I think defensively, look, despite maybe a few minor concerns, generally I think we're well stacked there. The players are very good, and other than individual mistakes that people have made at the back, as a unit, we have looked very good there. But mate, in terms of this Newcastle game, then obviously we went up there last season. It was the last game before the World Cup, and we were shit. I know we only lost 1-0, but it was the most one-sided 1-0 you could probably possibly have. I think it was that horror front line that Potter fielded of like Mount. It was Mount, Gallagher, and
Was it Mount Gallagher Havertz front line? It was
Oh,
something.
it's got to be Havertz. If it was horrible, then it's got to be Havertz.
Yeah, mate, I think that was the front line. And anyway, everything was dog shit in that game. Mate, I think we did beat Newcastle under Tuchel. I think Reece James scored twice in a game that we won 3-0. But generally speaking, we haven't got the best record there. It's a tough place to go. I know you obviously said you touched on you feeling confident, but like realistically, sort of how do you see this one panning out? Because our away form obviously is better than our home form. We've picked up more points on the road than at home. So maybe playing away from home seems to suit us a little bit better. Newcastle will come out and go for it, which again will suit us as well. But yeah, kind of how do you see this one going? Because regardless of injuries and whatnot, this is one of the toughest places to go in the league.
I think it's going to, honestly, mate, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I think it's going to be relatively comfortable. I just think that Newcastle, if I was going to predict a December, I think Newcastle will have Chelsea's December. I think it will be a bad month for them. Mate, they're without their best goal scorer, Isak. I mean, Kev sent me a screenshot of all the injuries. It's like 14 injuries, mate, in the first team. And that's not to mention, they're still in cup competitions. They've got to play us in the Carabao Cup as well. I think we're just going to break the space, and experience is going to show in terms of the fact that we know how to play against a team that wants to play good football. And Newcastle know how they want to play, but they don't have the players that they usually do to do it. So, momentum's on our side. It's not on theirs. Pressure is on both of us, but I actually think there's more pressure on us to win because it's going to be because it's so soon. I don't think that real, what's the word? I don't want to say disconnect, but that real feeling of fucking hell, Eddie Howe. Like, if you don't get it going, then we're going to be on your back. They haven't had that under Eddie Howe. It's just been comfortable. This is going to be the first stage for me with Eddie Howe where he's going to be seriously challenged as Newcastle's manager. I'm not saying he's going to get sacked, but I'm saying that there will be a little bit of a divide because I just can't see them getting the results with so many fixtures.
Yeah, do you know what it is? Just on Newcastle, it's funny because I think Eddie Howe's done a phenomenal job, but they've almost like qualifying for the Champions League is like almost, I don't want to say it's been a negative for them, but they're well ahead of schedule in terms of the project. Like in its first full year to get to qualify and to finish in the top four and get Champions League football, that probably wasn't in the plan. I know that might sound ridiculous, but that's well ahead of schedule. So now that's created perhaps slightly unrealistic expectations there. Well, look, you did it last season. The league's more competitive again this season. It's harder. They've not spent the most money in the summer. They've got a lot of injuries. And then fans are starting to get on their back now because the expectations have gone up because of what he did last season. If they got Europa League football last season, which would have been an outstanding season, then you could say where they're at right now is about right. But when you get in a Champions League, suddenly that expectation increases. And I think Eddie Howe and Newcastle are almost slight victims of how well they done last season. Yeah,
they're a victim of their own success. And like, this is not a criticism. Like, I'm not even throwing shade at Newcastle. They're just, it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen. And it's part of the process, and this actually relates to us as well. Because we did too much too quickly, and then we had to take a step backwards because we did so much. Our squad was too big last season. We had to cut it down. Newcastle did so well. They're in Europe now. It's affecting their Premier League performances, and they did fuck all in Europe anyway. So, that didn't really turn out too well. Mate. I mean, how do you see this game going out? Because it doesn't really. I'm not intimidated this year going to St James's Park. I'm really not. There's nothing intimidating about it.
I wouldn't say I was intimidated. Like, I feel in a lot better position going up following the Spurs and the City game. If we'd not played well against Spurs and City and maybe lost those two games, you're in a much more negative mindset about going up there. But look, I think we've got every reason to feel confident about going up there. Yes, their home form is very good, but they've got a lot of players out through injury. We're starting to come into some form now. They're a side that don't sit back, particularly at home. And as I said earlier, that might play into our advantage.
Absolutely.
But it's still going to be a tough game purely because they've got players that can hurt you. We're going to have to be on it. The atmosphere is always great at St James's Park. The Geordies love their football. look, I think we can absolutely win this game. And as I said earlier, I think this is the best chance we're going to have of getting a win at Newcastle for a number of years. Because of the injuries they've got on the form there and in the form that we're in. But it's going to be interesting to see how we regroup after the break. You talk about timing of the break, and you talk about momentum being a big thing in football. The break probably come at the perfect time for Newcastle, given their poor form and the amount of injuries they've got. It's given them 2 weeks off to have a bit of a break, get some players back from injury and go again. For us, when you're on the back of 2 big games where we've done really well, you almost just want to keep that going. You wonder how we're going to come back from the break. Obviously, touch wood, we suffered no new injuries. Hopefully, in the next few days before the game, we don't have anyone breaking down or anything like that. Nkunku and Lavia could potentially be involved. They've been pictured in training this week. They've got 3 or 4 more training sessions to try and convince Poch that they should be part of the squad on the bench. So that's a positive for us. Look, I feel confident, mate. But at the same time, there's always that sort of thing in the back of your mind where, because we're still a young team and a new team, you're still not sure what you're going to get from Chelsea, because no one expected us to get to play like we did against Man City or Spurs. And we could go to Newcastle and do the same. But then equally, we could also go there. I'm not saying this will happen, but we could also go there and we could get turned over.
Charlie, why'd you have to be so negative, Charlie? Why'd you have to be so negative?
No, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but do you know what I mean? Like, right now, where we're at as a team, we're still very inconsistent. We're very good against the good teams, and then against the slightly lesser teams, we're not as good. Look, I feel confident that we can win this game. I'm just saying that part of me is still a little bit wary because we're not a fully finished team, and you're just not quite sure what you're going to get. But I mean, in terms of setup, like, do you expect the setup? Do you expect the same starting 11 from the City game?
Well, not necessarily the same starting 11. I would be very, very pleased to see Mudryk play. I think Mudryk has looked great on international break.
How do you drop Sterling or Palmer? You can't really. That's the problem.
Well, I said the same thing about why you would drop Mudryk. So I think it's a double-edged sword. And this is the problem with having all these players as well. It's an issue. I mean, if
it's a good problem.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good problem to have, absolutely. But I mean, just for me, I see so much potential with Mudryk. And, Sterling has been better. So I'll give him that, absolutely. And for me, you're not dropping Cole Palmer. You're definitely not doing that. So, it leaves you with Jackson, who's, our main striker anyway. And then the competition is there, and Gallagher's a guaranteed start. So, yeah, I can understand if Sterling's playing. But actually, if I'm going, logic as well would tell me that, Mudryk's actually been playing competitive football. Sterling hasn't. And I think Mudryk has looked really good for Ukraine. So I think maybe he'll be a little bit sharper in that sense. You can't criticize Sterling for starting, but I don't know, man. An away day against Newcastle on the counter, they're both good players to have. I just think that Mudryk deserves more minutes. Like, there's a bit of favoritism there. Sterling for me just hasn't been good enough this season, even with the good performances he's done. Like, it's one good performance, 3 or 4 bad ones. And luckily, over the past 2 or 3 games, he's been better. I thought he was one of our better players against Spurs and City as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, you could argue that he can continue that form into the next game. But then I would also argue that, when we play against the lesser teams like the Evertons, teams that have a low block, that's when I would want to rely on Sterling, because he's a player with experience who should know how to break a low block.
Yeah.
It's not up Mudryk's street. Whereas with the bigger teams, who aren't going to sit back, that's where you can capitalize on Mudryk's pace. So, yeah, I mean, but, mate, I just checked on Newcastle's injuries as well, mate. This just reaffirms everything. I mean, Botman, he's out. Dan Burns out. Almiron's out. Isaac's out. Wilson's out. Harvey Barnes is out. Murphy's out. And obviously Tonali, he's up for the casino. So, yeah. I mean, mate, this is not going to be a difficult game in my eyes. Maybe I'm being cocky, Charlie. We're going to clip this up and.
Mate, what would you do at the back though? Because obviously Levi Colwill missed the last game and didn't go on international duty with a slight shoulder problem that he picked up. He's expected to be fit for this game. What do you do? Because Cucurella has done very well, and I think we'd agree, and I think a lot of Chelsea fans would agree that he should continue at left back. But then Disasi has also done very well this season. I mean, what would you do if Colwell's fit? What do you do with him? Do you bring him back into the side? And if so, where do you bring him back in? And who misses out? Because Thiago Silva's going to play. So are you harsh on Cucurella and put Colwell back in at left back, or you harsh on Disasi and put Colwell at centre back, or do you just leave Colwell on the bench? Like, again, these are, look, it's problems, but it's good problems to have. But what would you do with Colwell? Do you think he deserves to go straight back in? Because for me personally, Cucurella should be starting at left back. I don't want to see Colwell play left back. He's a centre back. So do you replace Disasi with Colwell, or do you leave Colwell on the bench? And you've also got Badiashile, who's only played 60 minutes against Blackburn in the Cup. You know, it's going to be interesting to see how he's reintegrated into the side as well. So, I mean, what are you thinking with Colwell in this game? Are you leaving him on the bench? Are you leaving the back line the same as it was against Man City?
Yeah, I would leave Colwell on the bench. I just don't think you could justify dropping Disasi or Silva, and then Cucurella, again, one of our best players in the back line. And that's such a good compliment because we've got so many great players to choose from. You know, James, if he's fit, you've obviously got to start him ahead of Gusto. Nothing against Gusto, it's just James is that better. Good.
Yeah.
And then you go into the next few games where you have a midweek and then a weekend fixture as well. You can afford to rotate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you can play it, you know, we know that Reece James offers us a lot creatively. So maybe that would be a great thing, you know, for the Everton games and the teams that sit back a little bit more and give Gusto a run out against Brighton and other teams who are willing to play football. But I mean, these are all questions and opinions I'm throwing out there. Pochettino could do anything. And to be quite frank, I don't really care as long as we get the result. But yeah, we've got great options. We haven't even spoken about Sanchez either, man. And I think he's improved. You know, it still looks a little bit shaky sometimes when he goes short, but I have seen him take slightly less risk over the past few games, which is positive. I presume he's had a word with the manager and, you know, Pochettino's just said, calm down a little bit. Obviously, we know you need to play out from the back, but, you know, don't cost us a goal every game because of it. So even if the centre-backs, you know, are struggling or the wing-backs or whatever, we've got a good goalkeeper who can, you know, be our last resort. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm feeling confident. I'm saying a score prediction right now. I'm saying 2-0 Chelsea against Newcastle. I'm saying 2-1 Chelsea against Brighton. And I'm saying 3-1 Chelsea against Man United. You heard it first.
That's big. That's big, mate. It's confidence. It's bold. I do think we can win. I do think we'll beat Newcastle. I do think that. I think it'll be a little bit closer. I would probably go with a 2-1. But yeah, as I was saying, you know, like all that's missing now really is stringing a run of wins together. Yeah, I really do believe that. And you touched on it earlier. Like, honestly, think if we'd had Nkunku fit from the start of the season, we'd be in the top 4 or 5 places. I really do think that. Or if we've had Nkunku fit, or we'd had like an Ivan Toney in the side, where we'd be top 4, top 5 quite comfortably, in my opinion, because of the amount of chances we've missed in those low block games. Like if we had one of those 2 players on the end of them, we're probably winning a few more of those games. So look, I'm confident in this side. I don't want to put too much pressure on Nkunku coming back because he's not kicked a ball for us. He's not kicked a ball in the Premier League. It's going to take time to build him up. I don't think he'll be starting games until maybe. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't start a game until Newcastle in the Cup in about 3 weeks' time. I think we'll use the fixtures to build him up in terms of giving him 10 minutes, 10, 20, half hour, whatever, build him up slowly. But look, I think things are heading in a positive direction. But, you know, what's really important about this run is that we don't find ourselves at the end of it sort of 12 or 15 points off Champions League spaces heading into January, because then I do think that becomes almost impossible to turn over. We need to be in a position where come the new year, we're either in those Champions League spaces or we're about 5 or 6 points off. If we're 10 plus, then I think that becomes very, very difficult for us to overcome. So, yeah, for me, if we can get through this run of games in December and we can be 5 or 6 points off Champions League, or actually in those spaces in the best possible case scenario, then we're set up for a very good second half of the season. Maybe if we get a striker in January, we get an Ivan Toney in January, potentially, if that does happen. I'm not saying it will, but if that were to happen, you're suddenly set up for a very, very good and exciting second half of the season. But yeah, this run for me, and I know it might sound mad, but this run for me is either going to make or break the season. I think this run will either confirm that we're banging contention and we can actually absolutely qualify for the Champions League, or this run will reaffirm to us that we're not going to qualify for the Champions League. That's how important I think these next few fixtures are.
Man, we can't afford not to qualify for any. Look, it's not even about Champions League football. I just think European football is a pro. I will take Conference League. I will take Conference League. That doesn't mean I expect Conference League. I still expect us to push for Champions League. But as a match-going fan, I miss it. As someone who's having these debates on rotation, I don't like the fact that we can't see other players come into the squad because there's only one game a week most of the time. So just to have the opportunity to rotate properly, like Pochettino needs to do, European football is just a must. And also, this is another reason I'd love Conference League. Then we can actually say with chess, we've won it all, mate. So that's another one.
And you get an away day in Iron Appa.
That's it, man.
Yeah, but seems like a good place to round out. Obviously, the fixtures are coming thick and fast now. Newcastle this weekend. Hopefully be a good trip, hopefully an exciting one, hopefully another 3 points on the board before we head into the games coming thick and fast in December. Hopefully Chelsea can have a better December than is usually associated with us. We didn't have December last year because of the World Cup, and that was a nice break from our usual shit form across that period. So hopefully this year will be different manager, different players. Let's hope for a positive period and move ourselves up the table. Alex, thanks so much for your time as always, mate. Greatly appreciated. Guys, make sure you smash the likes on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll catch you again in another episode soon.